am Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, questions that need answers. Is Donald Trump a racist? Is the country as fractured as it was in the lead-up to the Civil War? And that's just where we begin, when joining me at my table are New York Times bestselling author, longtime Fox News political analyst Ralph Peters, and veteran White House correspondent and my partner in all things politics, Matthew Cooper. Get yourselves a martini, park yourselves in your favorite chair. Here we go. If you haven't read one of New York Times bestselling author, retired U.S. Army officer, political talking head Ralph Peters' Civil War novels, you do not know what you are missing. There's a reason Ralph Peters has been called the finest Civil War novelist writing today. Now the author of 33 books that include award-winning best-selling fiction, military strategy, memoir, and over 1,000 published articles and essays, the expert on Russia is out with a gripping new Civil War novel, Darkness at Chancellorsville. His latest historical fiction, the story of the last great Confederate triumph in the Civil War. More importantly, a story of the social and economic challenges that were not resolved by the wartime deaths of 750,000 Americans. Challenges that continue to face our nation today. Let's talk with Ralph Peters. First, let me start with this. You're my hero. You are a rare breed of cat, my friend, getting rarer by the day, a principled man. I had to start with that. I begin here not only because I applaud your having the courage of your convictions and walking out on a compromised Fox News, which I think everybody knows about, but I think the fact that you are a principled man deems you eminently qualified to write your books. But before we go down that lane, I want to talk about Darkness at Chancellorsville. I want to just you give us a quick overview of it so that people understand what it is that we're talking about, because it's talking about some principles. Talk to me.
Well, indeed. The book Darkness at Chancellorsville centers on the Chancellorsville campaign in the middle of our Civil War. And it was a campaign that began with the Union Army having a 3-1 advantage, a brilliant plan, at least on paper. They got the drop on Robert E. Lee and the Confederates, and astonishingly, for a variety of reasons, Lee and Jackson, his principal lieutenant, Stonewall Jackson, were able to turn the situation around and inflict a stunning defeat on the Union forces. And that's not a spoiler. It's just, that's generally known. But what's not known are the details of the personalities, the rich personalities on both sides in this conflict. Their motivations for fighting, which were much more complex than today's instant critics will give them credit for. And overall, it's just a dramatic human story. And it resonates with our time, not only because the Civil War was about slavery. Civil War resolved the legal status of slavery, but not many other aspects of our social issues. But also, Chancellorsville shed a light on immigration problems of the day. Patriotic German-American volunteers fought for the Union and fought, for the most part, bravely. But when the Union lost the battle, they needed a scapegoat, couldn't criticize the native-born generals, so the Germans took the rap for losing the battle, truly unfairly, and you have to read the book to discover out why it was so unfair. Life isn't fair. But
the
bottom line is that it's an incredibly dramatic story, incredibly dramatic narrative. The book is, of course, very historically accurate. And I feel that so many people on the far right or far left are spouting off about the Civil War, and they haven't done their homework. They don't really know it. They don't have the facts straight. And I am trying to, in a dramatic narrative, in a manner that's a pleasure to read, help people learn the complex reality, the difficult reality of our past. Difficult in just a few days at Chancellorsville. We lost more Americans killed than we've lost in almost 2 decades of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Incredibly bloody, the price we had to pay to keep this country together.
You know, you and I have talked before. You've been on the show a few times, yeah. I think. But I don't know if you remember that I did a book on Antietam Battlefield that I worked with the National Park Service for five years on that. What I love about this is that Chancellorsville doesn't get a whole lot of play. which I find always interesting.
It gets a lot of play among students of military history or military officers because it's such a dramatic turnaround. And it's really, the entire battle is a study of leadership, both positive and negative. Poor leadership dooms the Union despite their incredible advantages. Inspirational leadership leads the South to victory. And something I must make clear, I don't take sides. My background is Yankee bred, born and bred. My Civil War ancestor wore a blue coat. But when I write about these people, when I presume to write about these historical figures, be they generals or privates, it is my duty as a writer to be as objective as possible, to try to understand them not only on their own personal terms, but on the terms of their times. What made a good man or woman in 1863? What were the values then that prevailed? And it's easy for us to be self-righteous, but if we're going to be self-righteous and condemn people out of hand, perhaps we should do our homework and learn a little bit about the incredible challenges they faced in their time, which was also, by the way, one of technological revolutions.
Absolutely. It's interesting because all of these things that you just were talking about are, I'm thinking about last night when I was thinking about the interview today, because first of all, I think there's such a parallel right now between those times and these times. And you're right. You can't judge. That's what I learned going on the battlefield. Everybody's principles, everybody's right. Go ahead. You take it. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, there are good guys and bad guys on both sides, but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. And I think that's the point, though, and I think that's relevant to today, too. I mean, people get into corners, and that's okay to some degree, but at some point you also have to be able to open your eyes and maybe, open your heart to whatever the other side and what they're trying to do or what they're fighting for, what they're saying, what their, economic situation is, which is something we have to talk about because that was a lot about what was going on. And we talk about slavery, but it was an economic war too. Yeah. But let me jump to this because I'm going to interweave all of this. I want to go back to you and Fox, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do think it's relevant to where we need to take our conversation about this book of yours today. First of all, I believe that there's no principle left in people anymore. I'm really cynical at the moment. So again, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, I'm bending down to you, my friend, because I think it was very principled to say that what you did in leaving Fox.
Well, actually, I didn't have a choice because I took an oath as a military officer to the Constitution of the United States. And when I felt the evening hosts at Fox were attacking the constitutional order, our institution of government, I could not leave. I could not stay at Fox under those conditions and honor my oath, and I take oath seriously. That's about a personality. That's about a character. I mean, there have to be more of you out there. I'm sure that there are. There are some of us who are fighting, just for the Constitution right now. Yes, you can't go wrong with the Constitution. Stick to the Constitution above party. The Constitution is what makes everything go. It's a magnificent document, and we all have a duty to protect it.
The Civil War was a war of principles, as we talked about. Some might say all wars are. Others would say that's not true. When you write about men like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, men in their day stood strongly for their beliefs, who stood for principles, whether you and I agree with what they were fighting for, right? I'm wondering what you're thinking about them in terms of where we are today.
Well, I am wary of self-righteousness imposed upon others. And so the whole controversy about tearing down the statues troubles me deeply. I warn people that when you attack one group's heritage today, that group may be in a position to attack your heritage tomorrow. And the whole, the idea, we want to tear down statues of Stonewall Jackson. Okay, wait a minute. At least learn who he was. Before he became Stonewall Jackson, and a moniker slapped on him early in the war, he was Thomas Jonathan Jackson, a professor of physical sciences at VMI in Lexington, Virginia. In Lexington, Virginia, Jackson outraged his neighbors by opening a Sunday school for free blacks and slaves. He was a devout Presbyterian. He broke Virginia law to teach blacks to read. Twice, black slaves in Virginia came and begged him to buy them and save them from being sold south to Mississippi or Alabama, where conditions were much worse and they wanted to stay with their families. The first one Jackson bought, immediately turned him loose to work as a waiter in the hotel, pay the debt, and be a free man. He also bought, at her request, a woman with 2 young sons. He offered her her freedom. She preferred to stay with the Jackson family. The man who became Stonewall Jackson was viewed as a champion by the blacks of Lexington, Virginia, and the rest of the surrounding county. Do we really need to tear those statues down? Now, the other part of this is Robert E. Lee, Jackson, Jubal Early, Wade Hampton, a long list of the men who become Confederate commanders opposed secession. They did not want the South to secede. Wade Hampton gave a speech in the South Carolina secession convention, begging them not to secede. But the country was different in the 1860s. It was, in a sense, 2 countries. In the North, there was a sense of American identity. You were an American first, then a Rhode Islander or a New Yorker. The North the industry was burgeoning. Immigrants were pouring in. Things were booming. In the South, it was slower. It was agrarian, with an aristocratic feudal structure. And in the South, in the 1860s, there wasn't that strongly developed sense of being an American. You had a sense of being a Virginian first, or a Mississippian, or an Alabamian first. And so when secession does come, these men who opposed it felt that they could not fight against their families, their neighbors, their friends, their states. And for many, such as Robert E. Lee, it was a terribly difficult decision. Now, we can disagree with the decision he made, but you have to at least try to understand what the dilemma was that he and others faced. And so I'm far from a champion of the Confederacy. Again, I'm a Yankee born and bred. But fairness is essential. When you're writing history, as in Darkness at Chancellorsville, a new book, you must strive to the maximum human limit to be objective and honest and fair to these men and the women who fought our Civil War.
I so agree with you, first of all, on the issue of taking down statues and things like that. You're doomed to repeat history if you don't know history. So, hello. And, and history needs to be put in its context. So, that's a conversation I could wax eloquent on forever. There is that. Here's something, though. North, South, is it really any different today?
Well, it is different. It's certainly different if you're an African American.
So, somewhat.
Yeah. Well, I say we've made great progress just in my lifetime. And it's accelerating. This will never be a perfect country. Only God is perfect. Our government, our country is made up of human beings. We are inherently fallible. To me, it's astonishing that this great American experiment works as well as it does, despite all its flaws. This great experiment in how human beings can best self-govern. And when I hear people say our country's never been so divided, I say, wait a minute. 745,000 Americans died in our Civil War. I think we were slightly more divided then. And no, there's not going to be another Civil War. We were more divided when I was a teenager in the late 60s and in the early 70s. The Vietnam era, Watergate, terrorist bombings on our own soil by domestic terrorists. We were more divided by far in the Depression. So these divisions that we assume are new because we've taken serious objective history teaching out of our schools by and large. We don't know our history, and therefore everything's suddenly new. And there's a German expression, die Lage war immer so ernst, which I will translate very loosely as the sky was always falling. Now, I don't take our problems today lightly. I think these are very difficult times, very dangerous times, times when honorable men and women from either side of the political aisle need to stand up for the Constitution and for truth, justice, and the American way. But at the same time, I console myself that we've gotten through far more difficult times than these.
There are different degrees of difficult. Sure. So I think we could put that into the mix of this conversation too. But I want to go back to the South just for a minute, only to say this, that the remnants of that South of the 1865s is very much still, I live in the South now. I grew up in northern New Jersey, so, I'm a northerner like you are, but, been living in the South in Virginia and further south now than I had been and it hasn't, a lot of it is very old. A lot of the old ways, of that time, remain, embedded in the culture of this area.
Yeah, that is certainly true.
Yeah, and it's interesting to watch because it's also how people see things and accept things.
It is, but on the other hand, I look at a city like Atlanta, Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara. Well, it's not that way anymore. Atlanta has basically a black city government, which functions very, very well.
Right.
There are islands of opportunity. There are islands of backwardness. It depends on where you go, who you talk to. I certainly would never make light of the continuing existence of prejudice in the human condition.
Right.
But at the other hand, I just have to look back to when I was a child in the 1950s. The lot of African Americans and other minorities was profoundly different than it is today.
Well, I'm not only speaking in terms of the African American population. I'm thinking in terms of how they view things, and white Southerners, if you will, and old white male Southerners, if you will.
Can I tell you a story about that?
Sure.
Yeah, there are cultural differences. When I was at officer candidate school in the Army, I broke my wrist. So I had to be recycled to have the wrist heal and start again. Meanwhile, a friend of mine from my enlisted time was going through officer candidate school. And he got a weekend pass, and I got a weekend pass. And he was from southern Georgia. I won't go into more specifics. But he was from southern Georgia. And OCS was at Fort Benning, Georgia, Columbus, Georgia. So I was going to drive down with him for the weekend. Now, I've been cooped up on Fort Benning, my broken arm. I'm a young man who's very, very, very interested in the opposite sex. And I assumed for the weekend we'd go out chasing girls. And he had to know girls and meet somebody. Instead, his ambition was to get together with the guys at the pool hall and drink beer. I mean, nothing against drinking beer, but that wasn't how I planned to spend the weekend. He'd get some good pecan pie out of it.
Yeah, I see the parallel. That's funny.
The whole good old boy thing is still very much alive.
It's very much alive, and our friend Mr. Trump has somehow taken advantage of it. The least likely person in the world to collect these people as his fans. Boy, makes you think. Makes you wonder too. I want to go back to what were you going to say?
No, go ahead, please.
No, I wanted to take it back to immigration because you made the point about the Germans and whatever, but there is another parallel because what does it say on the Statue of Liberty? That is no longer honored. That was a problem back then, and it's a problem as we speak today.
A real parallel is that anti-immigrant fever really springs up when large waves of immigrants come very suddenly. And in the wake of the Irish potato famine of the late 1840s and the failed liberal revolutions of 1848 elsewhere in Europe, there was a flood of Irish immigrants, of German immigrants, of Central Europeans, and the prejudice, we often hear about the prejudice toward the Irish, which is very real, but there's also great prejudice toward the Germans. And it really manifested itself in painful divisions in the Union Army that cost us battles and lives. So I think now one of the things that troubles people, in addition to unscrupulous politicians whipping them up, is the fact that immigrants from a certain area, when they come in large numbers or appear to come in large numbers very suddenly, it unsettles the native-born, especially those at the bottom of the economic food chain who tend to feel the most threatened. And because having lived in Europe, I've seen their very different model. As tough as our system can be, a tough love immigration system, we do ultimately integrate people. They do become, you can become an American. It can be tough, but you can become an American. You still can't really become a Frenchman or a German or an Italian. Mm-hmm. There's no integration model. So even in the 1850s, with all the prejudice, these men, they were determined to be good Americans. And the Germans who came, they'd built in the Midwest, they'd built new lives, families, professions, businesses, and yet they volunteered to fight for their new country, which they saw as the promised land of the freedom they could not establish in Europe. Mm. There's so many wonderful, wonderful stories in our history about real courage, not just battlefield bravery, although that's there, but the moral courage of men like Karl Schurz, who's a German immigrant and a general at Chancellorsville, but will go on in later life to be a champion of the American Indian, champion of minorities everywhere, an enemy of what he saw as American imperialism in the Spanish-American War. Or Oliver Otis Howard, an abolitionist who plays a somewhat almost dastardly role at Chancellorsville. He behaves very badly. He's very pro-abolition, but he doesn't like the Germans at all. And he's unfortunately in command of a largely German corps. But Oliver O. Howard, after the war, will go on to found Howard University and other traditionally black colleges, as well as a school for poor whites in Appalachia. So the war is a crucible that brings out the best and worst in men, but the legacy of the men who experienced that war and went on to become cabinet members, senators, Supreme Court justices, liberal crusaders, conservative crusaders, take your pick. The Civil War forged the America we know, and it's still a process of development. There's no goalpost for the United States. We don't get to spike the football someday. It's an ongoing debate, an ongoing struggle. But as I've studied the Civil War all my life and written the books I've written over the last decade about the Civil War, my respect for the men and women of the time has grown immensely. And by the way, they were every bit as complex as us. If there was a difference, it's that they were much more literate. They often wrote beautifully. We do not.
I love to go back and find old pieces. First of all, old diaries is one of my things that I like to go back and find. And first of all, the handwriting is to die for, right? You just, oh my God. But again, it's so literate, so beautifully well spoken, and so thoughtful. I wonder today, if where we are today is possibly because of, failings of our school systems or our family systems, is it gone forever that, what did we used to call it, when people were, they were great writers, they were great sports people, they did everything. They were jack of all trades, but what about the Renaissance people? And that, that doesn't seem to be out there anymore. There's something wrong in our society. And I think that Trump, by the way, just to get back to him for a moment, is reflective of that. But I want to move on for a second because I have you here. You are an expert on Russia.
Yes. Somewhat to my chagrin, I've wasted a lot of my life on Russia.
I don't think you wasted any of it at all. And in fact, it had a lot to do with why you walked out on Fox, because they wouldn't let you make your comments that you needed to be making about Russia's interference.
Yeah, Russia, Vladimir Putin is brilliant, and he is our enemy, not because we want him to be, but because he has chosen to be.
And he's a smart cookie. Here's the deal. Mueller comes out and, reiterates in more disciplined manner, I think.
In a very disciplined manner, he shouted, guilty, guilty, guilty.
I would say so. And first of all, let's talk about that. So is anybody doing anything about this? I mean, first of all, we all knew that they had interfered.
Yeah, well, I personally believe that President Trump is hoping they will interfere again in 2020, because I'm sure their internal polling is not very favorable to him.
Right.
Now, of course, the great danger is that the Democrats are going to self-destruct again, as they did in the last election. We shall see. And I'm not a party animal. I don't belong to either party. I'm an American first. I vote for the best man or woman, depending on the election and the issues. But this is a critical time. Donald Trump has done great damage, is doing great damage. But I also have to say this. When those on the left reflexively criticize everything he does, they discredit themselves. One thing he's doing correctly in his very clumsy splash mud around way is finally facing up to China. Previous presidents should have done it, and they didn't. China's theft of intellectual property, blackmailing our corporations, trade cheating, it could not continue to go on. It was doing real damage to our economy and national security. I would have preferred it had he gotten more overt support from both sides of the aisle on this, because we talk about politics should stop at the shore, and it should. But I'm just using that as one example. Overwhelmingly, to me, he's been disastrous. But if Trump does something I think is correct, I will say so. And by the way, one lesson of Goethe's Faust is that even the devil can accidentally do good.
So true, so true, so true. Listen, I'm agree. You and I are on the same way politically. We're in that center and we drift. But here's the deal. You're right. Somebody had to take China on. Here's his problem. He didn't do it right.
Yes,
he didn't do it. Now, I don't know, doing it right would have meant him engaging the Dems on it and everybody going to town on it together.
And he could have had Europe on our side.
And he could have, yeah, exactly. So, and so he doesn't know how to do it because his idea was right. It's been right.
Yeah.
And he has courage because of stupidity, not because he's like any of our Civil War heroes. He just kind of walks into, he's just brazen. But so here's this thing on Russia, though. They really did influence the election, and it does seem that nobody is doing anything to fix this. I wonder how deep they were in and if they left, stuff in our computers, because they don't just go in and then goodbye. They go in and they play. And how,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, and how dangerous is this? And I want to take it out one further and then I'll throw it at you, which is, listen, they said no collusion, but there is obstruction of justice and you can't get to the facts if you're obstructing justice. He didn't exactly say no collusion, by the way, none that
No,
he could.
Didn't.
Right. And
he said that it was not clear.
It was not clear. And it wouldn't be clear because the whole point of the obstruction of justice was to keep it from being clear, which I never hear anybody talking about. But should we be afraid of this Russia thing?
Well, yeah, we certainly should be. Now, I am certain that the professionals at the national security agencies, CIA, and other government departments are doing their best to protect us. The problem is, to really energize our government, to make everything mesh, you need presidential leadership. And Trump is just not going to lead on this issue because of his bizarre and as yet unexplained affection and subservience toward Vladimir Putin. But also, as I said, I believe he is hoping, he needs all the help he can get. He's hoping Russia will magically interfere again. So I think there are genuinely patriotic Americans doing their best. But we lack that presidential leadership, the president getting out and saying, this isn't going to be tolerated, we're going to stop it, it's not going to happen again, there will be consequences, and that's something you're just not going to hear from Trump.
So, do you think the Dems should impeach him?
Well, I think Nancy Pelosi is the closest to the fact, to the truth of this, that yes, of course he deserves to be impeached, of course he obstructed justice, the evidence is overwhelming. But is it worth going through the drill if the Senate is not going to confirm the impeachment, is not going to take it to its logical end? Does it just fire up Trump's base? And also, the entire issue is if you start impeachment proceedings and the Senate refuses to carry it to its conclusion, the president can say, see, they tried to impeach me and I was found not guilty. Nothing, no story there,
right.
Nothing there. And so it's a very difficult situation. I would personally love to see impeachment proceedings, but Nancy Pelosi is a survivor. She's going to outlast Trump, as long as her health is sustained. And
here's
I think she's doing her best.
Yeah, well, here's my thing. I say the problem with what you say is that this is about the Constitution, and he has violated everything that is in that wonderful, wonderful document. And if you don't do it, even if you don't get him impeached, then what you do is you're sitting back and you're saying, okay, that's fine. Just break the rules. Just throw it out.
The problem is the Republicans are not upholding the Constitution.
Well, I think if she's smart, that's true. Of course. But I'm wondering whether if slowly because I know she wants to just not do it at all. But if the facts start to drip out and like what happened yesterday, and hey, Brett Baer finally opened, and said, I've had Brett on the show. He actually said yesterday, well, it looks like something's here, maybe the more it is, more daylight on it, the more that it's read to the public, maybe. I don't know. We'll never solve that.
No, I'm not against impeachment.
Yeah, I understand.
Emotionally, I'm for it.
You're just afraid like we all are.
Tactically, yeah. I think you have to wait a little while. Let a little more information come out. Nancy Pelosi will strike when she thinks the time is right.
Well, hopefully. soon. I want to end with this. H.R. McMaster wrote a blurb for Darkness at Chancellorsville, and it is delicious. It's one of the best blurbs I've ever read. I want to
He's a very kind guy.
I mean, we could have a conversation. You'll be back. We'll talk about him next time. He says readers will not only enjoy this gripping historical tale and care deeply about the richly developed characters, but also deepen their appreciation for the courage, determination, compassion, and comradeship essential to prevail over daunting challenges. He goes further. In these dark times, darkness at Washington, that's my note to myself, and I'm reading my own thing.
Darkness at Chancellorsville.
Right. The concept of courageous, determined, compassionate leadership seems to be the stuff that novels are made of right now. That's what I wanted to say to you. So here you are. You write this book, and you encapsulate courage, determination, compassion, something so lacking in our society today. Go back and read this book, folks, because you will get a taste of what we are all desperate for, and it's wonderfully written to boot, as you always do. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Ralph Peters. His book, Darkness at Chancellorsville, is available at fine bookstores everywhere and on Amazon.com. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. It's Halli and Matt time. Here we go. This was a week.
Always a week.
I'm reeling from all of this. I find every day it's almost becoming like what? Like I'm not sure if it's a nightmare, a comic book. I'm stuck in the middle of some comic strip. Gary Trudeau. Can it get any more crazy? How much crazier is it getting? Oh, Matt, listen to me. This was tough this week to watch what was going on all sorts of levels. What were your thoughts?
Yes. I mean, the president took it to a new level with his criticism of the squad. The 4 freshman members of Congress, young women of color who he told to go back to their home countries, even though 3 of them are born in the United States.
Can I tell you that I don't like the word the squad? I don't like that moniker for them. I think it belittles them. I'm just going to say that.
I thought it was their name.
I don't care whose name it is. It's too cute for words. Because I'm going to throw in here right now before we even get into the depth of it all, that these are elected officials. These are congresswomen who, were elected to do a job. They're not stars. I wrote this morning that it's my opinion that we have to be careful here because what happened with the presidency, which it's turning into who's a bigger star, right? We have star presidencies now. I don't want to see that happen in Congress, and I see that happening on the Democratic side now in Congress. It's worrisome to me.
I understand what you're saying. I think that's a fair point. Regardless of what you call them, it's still, as you said, weird and crazy.
Right. Is the president a racist, in your opinion? I'll give you mine. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are.
I'm not dodging the question. What he said was racist. It's possible to me that he's something worse than a racist, which is he's a non-racist using racist language to inflame and agitate. So to me, it's possible it's totally cynical. He's not actually a racist, but is using racist language, which to me would be worse than being a racist.
I think they call that a demagogue, right?
Yeah, a demagogue. That said, he could just be a racist, but I don't think there's really any debate about whether the language is racist.
And I would agree with you on that. It may come out to be the same thing, though. There may be no difference. And in a way, I was thinking about this. Can you be a demagogue and not really be a racist? And to some degree, you're certainly belittling and using the trope. So, maybe it comes out. So Nancy and the gang go to, the floor of the House, and they go after him there, and that turns into another debacle. But I'm curious as to whether you think that was the smart thing to do, ye who are so brilliant about politics. Or was it political only? Was it stop this, Mr. President? Where were you on all of what happened yesterday? The first time in 85 years or something? Somebody said to me that this kind of thing's been said about a president.
I'm not sure she had a lot of choice. I think it was so provocative and so incendiary in the caucus, and such an opportunity for her to unite the Democratic caucus in the House, which has been riven by divisions over these same women, that I don't think she had a lot of choice. I don't think she could have just done a press conference and let it go at that.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because here we are, and here are the four of them. All of them have had their problems. You and I certainly have discussed the anti-Semitism that's come through the mouths of these women. Somebody said to me that yesterday, it's interesting that when they took a vote over the anti-Semitism, they included everybody. And why did she only this time, go after just Trump alone? You know what I'm saying? In other words, she...
Right.
Yeah, right. So, how much of this is politics? Because that's what you and I like to discuss. And what's the ramification in terms of what happens? Because all of this, of course, is about one thing and one thing only, election 2020.
Right.
Did Trump, by mistake, unite the Dems who were falling apart at the seams prior to his tweet? Forced error.
Well, I guess there are different theories about the ramifications of this. I mean, one is that Trump is smart because he elevated the status of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the three others in the Democratic Party and made them the face of the party, so that even if he was racist and offensive, it served his long-term goals by making them the face of the party, rather than, say, the 40 moderates or so who joined the House this fall and flipped seats and whatnot. That's one theory. The other theory is that he really just went too far, that this is not going to help the Republicans in the long run, that it was just too offensive to too many, and that they'll pay a price for this, and this is not the way he can win in 2020. I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that Pelosi didn't have a lot of choice in how to pursue this, and I think the question going forward is how aggressively is Trump going to continue this line of attack? We'll get a hint of that before listeners hear this broadcast, I guess as early as tonight when today is Wednesday, as early as tonight when he does a rally in North Carolina.
Well, let me tell you what, we already have some answers on that, because there is a poll that came out that by 5 points, I think his poll numbers with the base went up. And I found that extraordinary interesting. On the other side, of course, his support by Dems went, or those crossovers went down. It was also reported this morning that he is putting out there, in other words, so I say it's reported, but his team is putting out there, this was truly a coordinated effort. And it was and I said, well, who's the source for that? His confidants. I always get upset with those kind of answers because I want something specific. But that's what he's doing. And that says to me, Matt, I don't know if you'll agree with me, that this isn't going the way he quite wanted it to go. In other words, if he's framing it this way, he's trying to make it look like, this was politically motivated, not, socially motivated, i.e. I don't like blacks or colored people of color. So, what do you think on those terms?
Yeah, I got the sense from the news reports I read that he did this unilaterally, that this was not a coordinated attack, but his own impulses, and now he's kind of dragged the party along. I guess I'm not that surprised by the poll that showed his status ticking up with the base. I think anything that sort of, demonizes Dems is going to help with Republicans these days.
Demonizes Dems, or let me throw this out, or they like the racist aspect of it because that's who they are. Oy. It isn't.
Well, I definitely think there's elements of that. I think the sense, it gets a little complicated. I think the sense among Republicans that these congresswomen and that there are lots of immigrants who are coming here and despise America is a false notion they've been given by, Fox News, which convinces them that lots of people are coming here to impose Sharia law and, just raise Mexican flags and burn down our institutions. I think a lot of Republicans have bought into that.
I don't know how we got here because it's like the Civil War is being fought all over again in this country.
Well, if you try to imagine any other president saying the words that Trump did this week, Nixon, Reagan, the Bushes, Carter, Truman, I mean, it's really impossible to imagine the words coming out of any of their mouths.
So what about the fact that the Republicans are sticking by him? No matter what low he goes to, they are still in check.
And I think it's all about him. I mean, Josh Marshall of Talking Points Memo made a point last night, which is that any other senator or congressman who had said this on their own without Trump having said it, had just blurted it out one day, might have faced a real onslaught and backlash. It would have been considered Steve King type territory.
Yeah.
But Trump, if Trump does it, they follow dear leader.
Yeah.
And it shows his hold on the party. His unique hold on the party. So
let's talk hold on the party. What do you think is his hold on the party? You're going to tell me that a few judges is worth it to him? To these people? Abortion rights is worth it? The party is split in two. You've got your never Trumpers, right? So many have left. I'm trying to understand this.
I'm not sure it's exactly an equal split. I think it's just a splinter group of never Trumpers. It's pretty small. I think it's mostly small. A Trump party.
It is small, but then reporting is that within the party or the active, the Trump quote unquote Republican Party, because I would guess you'd have to call them something else, the Trumpers at this point. But, behind the scenes, they say they all get outraged, yada, yada, yada. I don't understand I just don't understand this. If Trump is going to be gone eventually, then what? Then what? There's probably no answer to that question. So, it's my frustration because I find all of this so bizarre. And I actually find the way the media is covering it also as bizarre. Because I just don't think that they're doing their job here. And you raised a good point also, by the way. Why do I don't? Because I think that they keep going down the shiny object lane, and they don't stick with the story, because everything is a click. And the next headline, move it. I think that's at some point, some editor, in some either newspaper, online magazine or something is going to say, what are we doing here? Our job is to report this. This story doesn't end just because a news story pumped up because he wants us to get off the one that's causing him the trouble. Let's get in there. Let's stay with this. Let's see this through. That's what we used to do as reporters, right? That's my issue, on the part of reporting. And you raise an issue. Should reporters call it racist? I want to commend you for asking that question because nobody else did. Should they be calling it racism? Should they call him a racist? What's a reporter's job in all of this?
Well, different news organizations have taken different approaches. The Washington Post is using the word racist to describe his remarks, not him. Others are still using euphemisms, racially charged, incendiary, or just quoting other people saying he's a racist rather than doing it in their own voice. But I think that's obfuscating. I think at this point, those are racist remarks because they're using a a false construct that's been around a long time about go home to where you came from, and especially when they came from America, I don't see any other way to describe it as those remarks than as racist.
So what do you think journalists should be doing at this point? Do you agree with me that they're too quick to go to the new shiny object and not staying on message?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough balancing act because the president says something, I think you don't want to ignore it. And certainly if the House of Representatives is occupied for the better part of a day, making a historic denunciation of a president, then I think you have to cover that. But in general, no, I don't think they should, devote too many resources to this because it's, as you say, it's just the shiny object.
It's a mess is what it is. It's heartbreaking. I guess we could stay on this forever. We'll have to go to the next shiny object.
Yes, we can't follow the shiny object, yes.
Okay. So I guess the next shining object, let me see. Which one should I bring up? Should I bring up the extraordinary cash hauls that the Democratic candidates are making?
It was interesting.
Wasn't it, though? Here's a question for you. If you put all the money that each of them has raised individually into one pot, does it equal out to what the Trump has earned?
No.
Okay, and so what does that tell you?
I think Clinton's got an amazing amount of cash ready to go, and he is going to presumably avoid any serious primary challenge. And so, he's got a good situation, at least financially, going into the next election now. Democrats will raise a lot once they settle on a nominee, but still, it's a reminder that anytime you're sort of impressed by a Democratic figure, you have to keep in mind that Trump is really, outraising the Democrats by a significant amount.
Money talks, right?
Money talks, and we'll find out, whether their very Facebook heavy strategy that the Trump campaign is planning on is going to pay off. I think they're going to spend the money in very different ways.
The question, of course, I want can Trump be defeated?
Well, to me, there's no question he can be. He's just, at least at the moment, he's just not that popular, and it's possible to beat someone who's not that popular. And he's certainly capable of becoming less popular if the economy softens or what have you. But, can the Democrats blow it? Of course. They have before. Trump doesn't need a majority of the vote to win, as we saw in 2016. So, anything can happen.
Well, we know that anything can happen. I just, going in, I wish that the foundation of the Democrats.
Well, you and I agree. There are definitely worrisome signs for the Democrats.
I would say so, and it gets more worrisome. There was a poll. It turns out that Kamala Harris is beating everybody in California. Not that that's so unusual, because California, of course, is California, and she's from California. Except to say that old thing about what starts in California rumbles across the country. Joe Biden, beware.
Oh, sure. I mean, she's, clearly has a capacity to, put together a winning coalition for the nomination. I think she has good skills as a campaigner. She's got some real charisma, and I think she could definitely be the nominee.
And in the wake of all of this demagoguery on racism by Trump, it's my theory that he doesn't actually think Biden is his problem. He thinks that Kamala Harris is his problem. And this was as much a shout out to Kamala Harris, by the way, as it was to the squad.
Oh, I think there's no question that this is
not anything I saw reported anywhere.
Agree. I think it's a preview of a Harris strategy.
Right.
more than being about these four women. Yes,
right.
Absolutely. Okay. Look, I think I'm already seeing online all kinds of things that Harris is not American.
Yeah.
She was born in, India or Jamaica, and that she's not American. Just like the birther stuff about Obama in 2008.
So I ask you this question, or bring this up, which is, if it's a black candidate or a female candidate, he has all his ammunition ready to rock and roll.
Yes, there's a playbook there,
right?
No question about it. And there's one against Biden too. I mean,
Biden's easy. Biden's easy to not that Biden, meaning from the president's point of view, I can see it's easy for to go after Biden per se. I think that the difference is that Biden really does have an interesting record that can be played many different ways, but it can also be played in a good way. But I jumped on your words. Forgive me. Talk to me.
No, I agree. I agree with what you say about Biden. Look, I mean, he's going to run a demagogic, backward-looking campaign that sort of, creates fear about a new and diverse America. And, Harris will probably he'll probably run his ugliest campaign against Harris.
Right.
Or maybe Booker was somehow the nominee. It's not looking that way, but you never know. So he's going to run his kind of race. I think it's definitely a backward-looking race. It's demographically in the long run, not a great strategy for Republicans over the next generation. But it could be enough to get him reelected.
Yeah, he doesn't care about the party. That's the joke of it. They all care. Right. They don't get that he doesn't care. They're just using him. They're each using each other in the most horrendous ways. I mean, that's what's going on here.
They're going to make Harris look like Angela Davis.
Oh, God.
I mean, they're going to they're going to go for this. They're going to go down this road again. And, is she savvy enough, and is the country, in a place where she can deflect all that and push it back and get elected if she's the Democratic nominee? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, one of the things that's not happening here is nobody's really delving into her past like they are on Biden. And bringing up Biden's record, as she did. But somebody ought to bring up her record, because she's got some issues, too, particularly with the black community, aren't going to be too thrilled when, as a prosecutor, she didn't always do the right thing, quote unquote, if you're an African American. She had some mixed reactions to things she did, like a very aggressive truancy enforcement plan. But those are some things that could play well in a general election, too, and is she going to run as... if she runs as a cop, that could be pretty good in the fall. Well, I guess first we have to get through the primary, and that's where I'm focused on.
Is,
and how much she gets bloodied in all of this. Sanders, by the way, goodbye, toast. I think he's done. You think he's done?
I wouldn't say anyone's done, but he's got to find an argument against Warren. It's clearly that Warren's rise is at his expense, and so. He hasn't really posed an argument of why he should vote for me over Elizabeth Warren. Why he's not doing that, I don't understand.
Low energy.
He has, in some ways, it's sort of an admirable reluctance to attack his opponents. I mean, he actually doesn't do a lot of that. And, he didn't go after Hillary on emails. And I think... he's just, in some ways, he's from a different era.
Not in some ways, in every way, he is from a different era.
Yeah,
he just happens to be a socialist, so that makes him a little bit more tenable in this era.
I just don't think he's comfortable attacking, and I think it's to his detriment at the moment, because he's got to find something to knock Warren down a peg or two, and he's just not doing it.
Let's go back to reporting very quickly, because it's something that you wrote. There really haven't been enough pieces on Biden and busing the 70s, Mr. Sarcasm.
Yes, I was being facetious. Well, the New York Times had another giant piece about Biden and his positions on busing in the 70s. And actually, the piece was well done. But the cumulative effect of these pieces on Biden and busing is sort of ridiculous. I mean, we know he opposed busing. That doesn't really tell us much. It was a common position among a lot of Democrats at the time. It wasn't especially unusual. Busing is not a policy that's poised to make a big comeback. It had a lot of problems, but they're harping on it to the exclusion of the rest of his 50-year career is kind of nuts at this point. But the press has kind of taken the bait. And if they wind up writing more about Biden and busing for a few years in the 70s instead of, say, his tenure as vice president, that would be pretty amazing.
I see it coming.
Totally.
Right. And it's really too bad. Immigration, there were those raids over the weekend, but I think they aimed it to zero. Just more him baiting. Anything you want to say about immigration, or does that say it all?
I just think he's a baiter in general, whether it's I'm going to fire and fury in North Korea and then he doesn't do anything, and the raids. I mean, he's into a lot of bombast. This is not a stunning insight.
No, it's not, except to say that if you get that pattern on him, I think that that says a lot, and it can be used by the Democratic candidate if they're smart to make that point clear and to play that. You can force his hand too. He's very good at baiting the Democrats, and they always take the bait, and reporters always take the bait. It's just so funny to me. And then they go, oh, at least now they're saying, oh, damn, why did I take that bait? Because they know it's bait. But it can also be used in a better way by candidates if they start to understand the game that Trump plays, which they say they understand, Matt, but then on the other hand, they don't act in accordance to comprehending what he's really up to. They just keep going.
I think you're right.
Right, and
I think you're right.
I don't know how you get them to change that picture or that game, but maybe somebody will. Well,
I think Buttigieg actually does a pretty good job of not taking bait.
No, Buttigieg just seems to be above it all. What McConnell, I can't even speak anymore after all these interviews today. After what McConnell said, trying to say I'm above it all, all of you out there, both sides are, the rhetoric's too hot. He who is the rhetoric problem, he's the hottest of them all. Buttigieg truly is the one out of all of them who is sort of above the fray.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough balancing act. You obviously can't ignore the president. I mean, you want his job, so you have to be making a case against him, and you're trying to get Democrat primary votes, and Democrats are in a state of constant agitation. So you can't totally ignore him, but on the other hand, you can't take every bit of bait all the time. So I think the Buttigieg model is an interesting one.
Yeah. I'm confused about him. But maybe I'll save that conversation. Why am I confused about him? I'm confused about him because I see the polls. I see the money coming into him. It's like he's the character that the reporters would like to see as the next candidate. But on the other hand, he doesn't stand a chance in hell because he can't get the black vote. It's really a mess. And it's a complication the Democrats probably really don't need. And it may become troublesome to them as this thing goes down the line.
I buy that.
Yeah,
I buy that.
I'm glad that you buy that because it's not, again, it's another conversation that people just aren't having when they should be having it. I want to bring up Kellyanne Conway before we end because she is burnt, honey. I think she's on fumes at this point. And her performance yesterday when she asked Breakfast Media White House correspondent Andy Feinberg, who was Jewish, by the way, about his ethnicity, I thought that was one hell of a bizarre moment, even for her.
It was, and she did walk it back later in the day, but still.
Big mistake.
Yeah, I think that's a big mistake, especially when her boss is trying to hew so closely to Israel and, turn the Democrats into anti-Semites, that, for her to do this, ask a Jewish reporter about his ethnicity.
It was just really sick.
It seemed bizarre. And look, the important thing is she's ignoring, what this ethics office, which is run by Darrell Issa's former counsel. I mean, it's not like a, Democratic pawn or something.
Right.
Has been saying, like, she's been, breaking this law repeatedly.
And nobody does anything. So
now she's blowing off a congressional subpoena.
Exactly. And if they don't come out against any of these people and arrest, just all they're going to do is arrest one of them.
Yes, it would focus the mind.
But more than that, I got to tell you, they're getting the reputation for being the wimps that they are.
I think you've been right. No, I think you've been right about this. Yeah.
They need to fix this, and they need to fix this in a hurry. And I just don't understand this Nancy Pelosi. I mean, we're going to end every show with the same thing, with saying it over and over again. I just don't understand this Nancy Pelosi. I don't understand any of them. When you got a bully out there, you just said it before. If you go after them, they usually, capitulate and fall apart and whatever. Now, anybody has really gone after any of these people who are doing Trump's bidding for him. I say round them all up. The old Kristallnacht that they were trying to do with these poor immigrants. Let's round up all these Republicans.
Okay, let's not go there.
I'm going there. But
I know what you're saying. I don't think you meant to say it that way. But yes.
No, I didn't mean to say it quite.
But look, Kellyanne, it's at least with the define the other subpoenas like McCann and others. They had a germ of a plausible argument, which is, this is executive branch business. We can't talk about it. But with Conway, it's about her public statements.
Right.
It's not about her advice to the president. It's about stuff she says in the White House driveway.
All sweaty like she was yesterday. You see how sweaty she was?
Well, it's a little schwitzy.
Oh, honey, don't talk to me schwitzy. I'm in Florida.
Well, that's true. It's schwitzy where both of us are. It's very schwitzy.
She was schwitzing. Maybe
she was schwitzing.
But she could have been in an air-conditioned room if they would just open up the press quarters again.
I know, but she goes out and meets them on hot tarmac in Washington. Yuck.
What can I say? Last topic before we say adios till next week. Trump has launched. Oh, wait. I must say, by the way, Kellyanne made that wonderful thing while her husband, George, had this unbelievable Washington Post
yes.
op-ed calling Trump what he is, a racist. So let's just put that in perspective. Okay. But we end on Trump has launched Women for Trump.
Yes.
Can I just say this? Oy vey.
Well, he got a lot of women voting for him,
Did you see CNN talking to the women in Texas?
I did, but they were Republican women. I wasn't shocked.
Oh, I don't know. It looked to me like it was Dynasty 1980.
It was a little Dynasty 1980, but they were all right. They were all on board, including the woman of, I think, Mexican ancestry. But yeah, they were all on board. Yeah, but they're Republicans. I mean, it's his party.
Okay, well, so I don't think that they're truly Republicans. I think they're wives of Republicans, and they do what their husbands say to do. I.e., this is 1980, and women are still barefoot and pregnant and wearing diamonds in the kitchen.
I don't know where to go with that.
So on that note, we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. Could be.
Boy. Okay. It's been swell, buddy.
All right.
See ya.
We'll see you next time.
Next time, Dawn. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.